Every time we do it.
Every time, bro. And we made it here dry and not wet.
And not dead.
And not dead, bro. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Jesus, for keeping me, holding me, keeping us safe and getting us.
Because these people will be trying to kill us.
Bro,
I swear.
seriously, I lived, like, no joke. I saw 3 accidents on Southern Boulevard today.
It took Marla 45 minutes to get home when it's normally like a 20-minute drive.
Yeah.
Like,
so,
and there was like one accident like right outside the house. Like, right
oh my
before
gosh,
it
was crazy.
It was insane. I actually have a theory on why people go crazy when it rains.
Driving in the rain.
I told this to a detective, and the detective thought it was hilarious, and she's like, "I'm telling my entire team this theory." Okay, so what is Florida known for? Oh, I'm sorry. What is one of the things Florida is known for?
Sunshine.
We are actually the what's it called? The rehab capital of the world.
Oh yes, we know that too.
We are rehab capital of the world, right? Which is where Florida Man comes into play, but we're not going to talk about that today. So obviously, when you have rehab, you have people who fall back on what they're trying to do, and there's a black market and all this other stuff, and of course, Florida many years ago really started cracking down
on the pill mills,
on everything, bigger, whole drug war, gang war, whatever, insert whatever city, whatever.
Right.
And to not get caught, sometimes they throw them in the Everglades, throw them in the river, throw them, in the ocean, down the toilet. It all goes into what? The water system.
The water system, yeah.
Fun fact, it's hot in Florida.
Yeah.
As you said, there's a lot of sun in Florida. What happens to water when there's a lot of sun? It evaporates. What's in the water? A ton of drugs. So what happens is the drugs, in very, very minute amounts, get taken up into the sky, and then when it rains, people who are very susceptible just...
So you're saying there's people are microdosing on drugs right now?
I am telling you.
The entire state microdosing at one time.
It's a conspiracy. It's my own kind of conspiracy theory, but that's kind of what I think. And by the way, I told the detective this, and she's like, my God, it all makes sense. She was like, it all makes sense now, because if you think about it, when it rains, people just turn into either complete idiots or they complete the other direction. I'm not going to say in this podcast. So, I mean, that's just my theory.
Well, it's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
Again, I could be completely wrong.
You should write a whole book on it. I think people would buy it. It's interesting.
What do you guys feel about conspiracy theories? Have you ever dive into the wormhole of the YouTube spectrum and start diving into these?
Of course,
bro. Yeah. There's been times where, and I always fall for it, bro. And I'm like 37 videos deep into time traveling. And then I'm convinced that there's a freaking time traveler somewhere.
Yeah.
And then now there's this guy who's blurring his face, who claims he's from 2047 and says that this is going to happen at such date and this will happen in such date and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, bro, it can happen. It's an actual, like, I hate doing the conspiracy theory stuff and the hypotheticals, because I don't like doing hypotheticals.
Yeah.
I'm not one to do that, but it's very interesting how people come up with these things, especially time traveling.
Well, I would say this, to me, I think that the conspiracy theory rabbit hole is fun, but I would like, this is just my expression, I call it intellectual porn. Like, it's fun and exciting, but it's not real.
Yeah.
Just because I don't see too much validity of that necessarily happening. Like, maybe one day I'll be proven wrong, but with all the conspiracy theories out there, how many have been really proven to be true?
Right.
And the big ones. And yes, there's the joke, the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth is like 18 months. And yes, I get that there's some things that there's conspiracy theories that happen that do come true, but we're talking about the big things.
Right.
The JFK assassination. It's like, well, and that's fun to look at. It's exciting.
Right.
I just haven't seen proof of all that evidence. And like, I'd love to see it come to light.
Right.
But, this happened in the 60s. This is going on, 60 years now. I just haven't seen the evidence. So I look at that.
So what's one that you actually believe? What's a conspiracy theory?
Well, no. So I don't really believe any, to be honest. Like, that's just my thing. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. Like, aliens, I think there's validity to it. I haven't seen enough evidence to say, yes, there is. I don't doubt it. Even from a theological perspective, I have no doubts that God could do that.
Yeah.
Or it could be a various different things.
Some people in the Christian world would say that the aliens were the
The Nephilim?
The Nephilims that came onto Earth and they started procreating with human beings, and now there's this hybrid human being, and then somehow they...
It must be me. I'm super tall.
Yeah, and somehow they created these flying saucers, and they just got out of here before Noah built the ark, and there was the flood.
Listen, remember.
so there's Christians in the world that believe that.
Unicorns and dragons are in the Bible. They are.
Yeah.
Well, dragons definitely. Where's the unicorn?
It's actually a translation that they do it in. It actually in Genesis talked about like a horned creature.
Yeah.
And eventually, when the translation says one horn, so technically it's a unicorn.
Well, that's pretty interesting.
So unicorns and dragons are real, kids. Look it up in the Bible.
Wow. Look it up.
But you never answered my question.
Yeah, how
do I have one that are real? I don't know if there's one that I would say I definitely believe.
Like Sasquatch?
I mean, that was...
Bigfoot.
Have you met my dad?
Bigfoot. I don't really subscribe to all that stuff.
Those are fun.
Those are fun.
Yeah.
Which other's a fun one? The how the Egyptian pyramids were built.
Yeah.
People think that there was aliens that helped them with the precise precisions and the angles and how it was facing the sun and how were they able to angle it to face it precisely to the degree facing the sun.
Correct.
And it's like, maybe there were aliens. I don't know.
Okay, hold on. Low key, super low key. If we didn't have the Dark Ages, we would probably be a spacefaring race right now. Fun fact.
How did you come with?
Yeah, how did you come with that?
So remember, the Dark Ages came around because there was a loss of education. Mm-hmm. There was a loss of that's obviously when spirituality kind of came into a big part of it. But even if you look at Romans, even the simplest things they did were way beyond what we think ancient people could do. But remember, I think kind of looking back, we don't give them enough credit because sometimes when you spend a lot of time on something, you eventually figure something out. Yeah. Right. And so even the Romans kind of had a lot of modern day things. They had running water. They had public, they had a full on aqueduct system, came from the mountains, all this other stuff. Yeah. Like they figured it all out. You're telling me that they couldn't do a little more advanced? They definitely could do some more advanced stuff. Now, am I saying did they have supercomputers? I don't think we take it that far. Right. But they definitely did more than what I think we could give them credit for. But then what happened after the Roman Empire? The Dark Ages. Yeah. What happened in the Dark Ages? Well, people weren't educated as much. Society was gone. Okay, remember, that was for a couple hundred years. Right. If you think about it, if we were to continue along the path, because remember, in our own society, we only went to the moon in the 60s.
Yeah, 60 years ago.
60 years ago, we went to the moon for the very first time. You're telling me in the 100 years, there's been more development in the 100 years with technology and everything else, the past 100 years. You're telling me that we couldn't do that if we didn't have the Dark Ages?
Well, I have an idea about that. So when we talk about and I definitely agree, we look at human advancement as far as technology goes, and we look at the last 200 years, and where we've come in the last 200 years is far beyond what the rest of human 6,000 years of history combined, far beyond. And so you ask yourself, well, what happened? How did we make this big jump? And was it inevitable? So one, I wouldn't say it's inevitable because what's so special about this last 200 years why didn't that happen 3,000 years ago? And so we can trace all that back to the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment basically, came from this idea that we're going to be able to get along with each other as long as we're protecting life, liberty, and property. And as long as we're not interfering on that, we're going to live in freedom. And if you want to pray to this and such God or no God or whatever, we're going to get along together. And, outside of protecting those things. And then from that, you see an explosion of innovation. When the human being is free, the human being operates its best. Yeah. So I think that if we could have gotten to that point, and we can lose that by all means. We can lose that again. We can lose that.
But then humanity.
But then humans.
But then humans.
Yeah.
Stay tuned to the next episode. We're going to call it But Then Humans.
But then humans. Yeah. Oh, look, there's another book.
But that's so powerful too because I had a conversation with a buddy of mine about enslavement and because he's big on mentality. Your mental state is such a powerful tool. Absolutely. And when you were oppressed and enslaved to believe something that essentially would make you ignorant. There's not going to be good fruit coming out of that. There won't be advancements in technologies, advancements in intellectual properties, and advancements in XYZ, right? So I think that is such a basic, to me anyway, such a basic truth, but such a powerful truth, that when a human being is free to do whatever they feel that they can do as far as maximizing their potential, maximizing their talents, doing
inside the guidelines of protecting life, liberty and property.
That they could do big things for society, right? I think it's more of a net positive than it is a net negative.
Right.
So
prosperity is positive for society.
Yes.
And it's seen time and time again. If people are prosperous, giant advancements occur. And anyways, conspiracy theories.
I was just going to say, and that's the other thing, is that when you go to a society that says, okay, we're just going to protect these three things, life, liberty, property, that is going to be things that I disagree with happening. And like, I have to be okay with that. And like, are we going to be, that is difficult. We have to wrestle that with ourselves, but what do we want to see society be like? Do I want it the world as I would have it? I'm not God. I don't have it figured out. But I think it's very clear in the Bible that even, God wants us to
have fun.
Not demand people believe and think the way I think, or punishment. It's like, basically, it's like if we're protecting those things, we're not supposed to make human laws necessarily against things outside of that. Now, we as Christians are held to a higher standard than God's law, but we're not to, impose that on anybody else.
What do you think? I see you rubbing your beard, bro, and you're thinking.
I'm doing a lot of thinking. Well, I'm thinking about tying in all three of the conversations that we wanted to have before we got into this, because I'm like, oh, look, good segues.
Yeah.
We're great podcasters.
No, but I tend to agree to most of what you just said.
Okay.
I don't have a rebuttal to that. Not that we're here to debate on what is true or not. I mean, the baseline at the end of the day is what's for us being that we are held to a high standard. We are held to live a certain way, live by God's law, live according to the scripture, live a fruitful life. You know what I'm saying? I do believe that God created us to enjoy the things of what the world could give us in the confines of, doing the right thing in layman's terms, right?
Absolutely.
If we operate outside of those biblical guidelines, then it's debauchery, it's treacherous, and it's more of a net negative in your life than it is a net positive.
Absolutely.
So I think that when we do walk out our salvation, it should be through those parameters. Of course, we're not perfect. We're not baby Jesuses out here. We do fall short. We do trip. We do say some things in the car when people cut us off when it's raining, and we
an hour ago.
we and at times we got to repent, right? We all have been in places, in some place in our walk, in any pick a season in our lives. There's been places and spaces where we've repented. And we
hope so.
Yeah.
After every basketball game.
Seriously. But I think that's pretty dope. I love that conversation. I don't want to dive too much into conspiracy theories. That's not really what we're here for. But this is episode 79. And I'm here with two of my nearest and dearest buddies, Tyler, Doug, returning co-host, Tyler, my resident co-host. This is your third one, right?
Yeah, third one,
bro.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I'm happy to have Doug Petrozelli here. You walked life with me for how many years now?
Oh, we're going on 10 years this January.
10 years, bro.
I met you in January of 2014.
2014, yeah. So going on 10 years. I'm excited to kind of talk about some little bit of current events, a little bit of end time conversations, the rapture, the pre and post millennial stuff. I like talking about that. I like engaging in that kind of talk. It's really interesting.
Do not have 3.5 hours.
I know, right? But real quick.
This isn't the Joe Rogan podcast?
I know, right? Soon to be, right? Soon to be. But real quick, we were talking off camera about this influencer / streamer / gamer / TikToker. I don't know how many followers he has on TikTok. I think he has I'm not going to pull it up. But his name goes by Kai Cenat. For those you gamers out there that subscribe to that, you probably know him. He's probably your LeBron James of the gaming world. I don't know much of Kai. I know that he is very. He doesn't hide his faith. He says that he's a believer, although there's some questionable stuff there. When I do see his content, when I do see his live streams.
So would you say it's questionable on what he's saying or questionable what he allows on a live stream?
I think questionable on both ends. I think questionable on what he... it's questionable on how he attacks life and how he does life and how he speaks, the language that he uses. And then questionable on the end that he allows the behaviors and the things that are said and posted on his live streams. It's not Christian. I wouldn't recommend anybody who goes to church and wants to preach the gospel and share the gospel with people to entertain that kind of stuff, because it gets pretty treacherous, pretty debaucherous, and it's full of trolls. People troll you, they call you out your name. It gets really disrespectful, and he allows it. And I think the reason why he allows it is because that's just the niche that he's kind of in, and that's why he's always going viral. He's constantly going viral, and
isn't he driven to that? Because that's what he's known for.
Yeah, he's his viral
being a YouTuber, Twitch streamer, whatever you want to call it. It's like you focus on getting more fans, getting exposure,
right?
Kind of sometimes no matter what that exposure
by any means necessary,
what comes with that. It's like,
but at what cost, though? I always say, as a Christian.
Yeah, well, I mean, because my whole hope is, and I've been there. You know, there's a time where I had, a collective between all, and this may not be as big of a deal today, but we go back 7-8 years. I had about 40,000 followers combined on various platforms,
right?
And I was trying to lead ministry and doing things like that. Yet there was this constant need of I need to come up with something new and exciting to
engage,
to broaden the follower.
Yeah.
And the Lord's really been working on my heart. It's be authentic for me, and I will bring. Not to say that we don't practice marketing, not to say that we don't do things like that nature, but the that shock jock thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing when it comes to business. I just know that, man, for me, what I'm trying to do, I want to be authentic, and I want to be authentic. Like an authentic man of Christ,
right?
And I do believe that that's good enough. I do believe that's better,
right?
And I think that there's a market for that.
Yeah.
And to use crude terms, I was just saying, I believe there's people that are desire and thirsty for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Authenticity is definitely a pretty solid camaraderie that can be sold in the marketplace, right?
And I feel that from this show.
Yeah. And I feel it from other. Because I'm not here to dig on other influencers and other podcasters. I'm not going to dunk on anybody, and I'm not here to dunk on Kai neither. I think Kai is a great young man, and he's figuring it out, just like how I was figuring my salvation out and my faith out when I was a baby Christian, trying to figure this stuff out. And I think we all.
I hope I always am.
Yeah, we're
we'll
still
be figuring it out for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes we're inclined to point the fingers at certain people because of their language, because of their demeanor, their cadences, and their culture. Yeah. People say, "Oh, why is he cussing?" Right. Or "How do you feel about cussing?" You as a Christian, how do you be? Because I'm being asked this. Mm-hmm. I had 2 people cuss out of the 70. Well, this is episode 79. So out of the 79 episodes, bro, right? Mm-hmm. I've had 2 people who are figuring it out, and they're entertaining the idea of Christianity. I've had 2 people that are friends of mine, and I care for them and I love them either way, right? And they cussed on the show, and I said, you know what? They're where they're at, and I can meet them where they're at. They said the F-bomb. I let it ride. Mm-hmm. They realized that they F-bombed, and they were like, subconsciously, I guess they said, okay, I'm not going to cuss anymore. They didn't verbally say that during the broadcast. Because we were having a flowy conversation, but I noticed it through their body language that they were like, I'm going to clean it up. Yeah. And we had a great episode. Shouts to Mike Nils. I love you, bro. But
for telling us who dropped the F-bomb.
And then I had another.
You can go back and see which ones it is because there's the little E next to it.
And then I had another young lady who just got saved not too long ago and still figuring it out and still kind of navigating through what it is to be discipled, what's discipleship, what it is to have a relationship with God, and she F-bombed. And we were having
because it was raining before she got here.
Yeah, and we were having a flowy conversation. It was great conversation, and for the sake of content, I'm not going to stop you on a dime and say, "Yo, you cussed." Cut that out. You know what I mean?
No, I completely understand that. I think, I have my convictions, and we're all working it out. My whole thing is I hope I'm better in the next year than I was this year. And I hope in 10 years the things that, I'm getting wrong today, the Lord's going to be revealing things that I have no idea that I'm getting wrong. So one, I want to have grace for people. I want to hope that, hey, we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I also want to stray away from publicly, discipline. I do believe that there is place for church discipline, particularly if I have that place in somebody's life.
Right.
I hope that people feel that they have that in my life.
Right.
And publicly, that's something that I think Jesus did.
Yeah.
I have debates about that necessarily, but as for a general rule,
me too.
I'm not so much into public debate.
Yeah.
I'm much more into public grace. I love that person where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, this streamer, what he allows, what he doesn't allow, I'm sure people have a place of hey, this is not church. He's trying to bring people in. Maybe he feels like he's an evangelist.
Yeah.
And these are obviously people that he doesn't have a relationship with. That's a one-on-one.
Right.
Is that the place that God's calling him? I don't know him, but I just also want to have grace for him, for somebody that's not here to defend themselves. Right. And if he is doing something wrong, I'd also like to have a personal one-on-one conversation with him. Yeah. And then if he wanted to discuss that publicly, we could do that.
Yeah, we could do that too. I think public discipline for me is a no, because it's just triggering. Mm-hmm. People have their own traumas. People have their own convictions, like you said. People have their own walks where they came from. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that public disciplinary actions amongst 2 or 200 people is a no for me. I think that I'd rather publicly show grace and publicly celebrate someone and then privately correct. Yeah. There's correction privately so we can celebrate publicly. Sure. That's where I'm at. Some people aren't there. Some people.
I'd say it's a general rule. I don't want to throw it out completely and say we're never supposed to do a public. I mean, we take it to what level extreme. Somebody's yelling and screaming at my wife and threatening her. Well, I'm going to publicly discipline that. So
there's definitely some outliers.
Right.
Sure.
So I think as a general rule, though, that's my thoughts, at least where I'm at now.
Yeah.
Let's get biblical.
Yeah, for sure. Pastor Wyman.
So obviously, the first thing you do is you go to the person.
Yeah.
But if you look in the Bible, even Paul says that you first go to the person one-on-one.
Of course.
If that doesn't work, you bring in a second person. If that continues not to work, then you bring them before, not in public, but before the fellow body of believers.
I still think that's. But I still think
that's not public, because here's the thing.
I still think that's private, though.
That's still considered private because that's within a close. Because remember, body believers, right? No one's going to talk, especially if they are something like elders or council people,
because there's
or whatever, deaconesses, whatever. Yeah. That's still within the body of believers. That's still held within the church itself. And so, because the only time that Jesus did any type of public thing was when he was flipping tables and whipping people.
Right. Yeah.
For over what? People selling things in God's house.
Right.
Right. That's when he did. Everything else, even the naked woman thrown on his feet.
Yeah.
What happened? Everyone disappeared, and then he said something.
Right. He corrected it privately.
That's why I'm the same way with you guys. I never about the public shaming. Never about it. I feel a little weird having this conversation because I'm not really shaming him. It's okay, it's just a really interesting conversation. Right. But everything all that should be done in public, because if I would have had my things I did done in public, oh boy, I would never show my face around anyone again. I'd live in a cabin in the woods, bro. Right. I'd be living off the land and berries.
But unfortunately, that's some people's reality, that they were publicly shamed before a congregation because they had premarital sex and they ended up having a baby out of wedlock. And it's been documented. For those that missed that, I don't know if you watched the Hulu
there's a couple. So there's two. There's Hillsong and Megachurch Exposed.
Yeah.
They kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
And then there was the FX one where Carl was actually on it.
So the FX, not the FX one, but the Hillsong Exposed, they talked about that young lady.
Yes.
At the time, she was younger.
Yeah.
And she was publicly shamed by the congregation and the leaders there because she ended up getting pregnant before marriage. I think that's a no. That's a hard no for me.
I do want to just and I want to say that too. One, just in defense of that particular, she is basically calling out Carl Lentz, saying that was what happened. Mm-hmm. I would be really interested to hear his response to that.
Right.
I understand she was hurt and she saw that because I do grasp that people sometimes are upset with the church, and it was done correctly.
Right.
It was corrected privately. That person was still upset because they were challenged to, hey, you need to change and this is not okay.
Right.
And then they claimed to be church hurt and claimed that they did all this shaming when it was literally done privately. It was done exactly how we're supposed to do. It's like, well, I'm not just supposed to affirm every single thing and make you feel good about it. Like as a pastor, I need to,
hold you
guide
accountable.
You and call you out on your garbage.
Yeah.
Like, I need that. We all need that. Like it's not this place that everything is nice.
Right.
It's where we are kind.
Yeah,
and the kindest thing to do is to correct. So in that situation, if exactly what she said happened, yes, 100% wrong. And I know that things like that do happen.
Yeah.
But I would be interested in that specific situation. I want to hear the pastor's response.
So if we were in front of Kai Cenat, this streamer, right? Yeah. If we were in front of this guy, just to wrap up the Kai conversation, if we were in front of him and we were either friends, mentors, or just people that happen to know him, if he was in front of us, what can we possibly encourage him to do? Because we saw the video off camera. Tyler pulled it up, and he was very apologetic, but also at the same time holding his followers accountable to of the chaos that occurred in New York City. And for those that don't know, and I'll leave the links on the description so you guys can look it up. But he essentially announced on his stream that he was going to go to New York City, not too far from Times Square. And he was wanting to do a meet and greet with his thousands of followers. And the first couple hundred followers was going to get a free PS5.
One person or something like that.
Oh, he's only giving out one?
He was giving out
one. Was it one?
I thought it was one.
We may be wrong, but either way, he was giving away a PS5, and to gamers, that's throwing chum in the water, and you're going to get chaos.
Yeah.
And I think that was very irresponsible for him to do that, especially in a city like New York, who is very busy, traffic everywhere, a lot of commuters, a lot of foot traffic, what have you, right? I think that was pretty irresponsible on his part. Now he's saying he's sorry. He's praying over his situation on live stream and thanking Jesus and Jesus this and Jesus that. However, he did what he did. I don't know how genuine his apology is. He's facing felony charges. He has court next week. If he was in front of you, what would you say to Kai?
So, I mean, one, and I don't know the whole story, but if he's simply giving out a PS5, and people are acting erratic, one, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving out a PS5.
Oh no.
Now, there's a societal issue, and there's wisdom in knowing what your audience is, and I completely understand that. So I could say, hey, is that a foolish thing to do? Depending on knowing his audience, and I don't know his audience terribly well, but I have a decent understanding of what it is. Knowing the city of New York City, maybe that's not the wisest thing to do. I also have to think, man, there is a responsibility on a society, because there are places where you could do that. Now, maybe not New York City. I don't know his crowd. Maybe not his particular crowd, but there is that. So I did like that he was calling that out, because there is a societal responsibility. Like, we should be able to know how to act and behave.
Right.
I want to live in a society where we can be free and decent. And in order to be free, we need to be decent.
Right.
So I would say that, and then, to the degree of where he's at and what he allows on the live stream, from what I understand, he's not so much debaucherous,
Yeah.
but he allows a lot of debauchery to happen on there. I would probably ask him, like, so what do you believe you are as God? Like, as far as like God's calling on your life, is this a place that you're just trying to evangelize?
Right.
And like, this is a hospital for the broken.
Yeah.
This isn't church, but I'm gonna, do whatever I can to bring the broken in. And I'm gonna speak truth.
Yeah.
Allow this to be a place for people to be themselves.
Yeah.
Not the church. This is not the church, but this is an evangelistic ministry.
Yeah.
I would say, hey, maybe there might be some validity to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I also got a challenge, like, let's make sure that this is what it is. That you're staying pure, that you're staying accountable, that you are doing everything to guide the conversation to be something that's pointing to God.
Yeah.
Which I don't know him or his show that well.
Yeah.
But those would kind of be, kind of the way I would guide in the record.
Yeah, because abusing the grace card is also a sin. If you're gonna abuse grace, because we're under grace and God loves us and He showers us with His grace on an everyday basis, and you're abusing that kind of makes you a Pharisee.
Well, I would even say I've heard it. I forget which pastor described it, and I really held on to this, and I do believe this is to be true.
Right?
Is grace good enough to abuse? Yes, but if you've accepted it, you won't abuse it, and that's just a harsh reality.
Yeah. For sure. Right, Pastor Wyman? Put on your pastor hat, bro, because we're going to need it in about 15 minutes.
Oh, I'm waiting to pull that one out. I think if I was in front of him, I think I would first kind of let him know that God's going to use him in ways that he doesn't know yet.
Right.
But I also think the beauty about him being very in the public eye can be used as a tool and a weapon against the enemy.
Right.
But also to be careful, because the enemy will use the exact same tool to destroy him. Because I've seen some of the videos that he's been in. He was with these guys, these YouTubers in the UK called the Sidemen or whatever they're called.
Yeah. I saw clips of that.
I was laughing.
Yeah.
I love that one clip. He's like, "Who are you get?" His little like Michael Jackson movie. I was dying, but it's like, okay, you're going to surround yourself with people that will kind of live a very similar life than you, but that similar life is not one in which it's going to be conducive to be able to truly live out your faith the way you need to. And if we're going to tie it to a later conversation, in Revelation, Paul kind of is trying to tell us, like, hey, we need to like reject everything else that isn't Christ the Lord. Right. And unfortunately, I think when you live in that life where you interact with so many people almost on an instantaneous basis, where so much of your life is public. Right. Because my dad was in radio for many, many years. Many people knew who he was. Like, I even ran into people a couple months ago. They were like, "Oh, like Wyman, like John, do you have any relation to John?" I was like, "Oh yeah, that's my dad." Holy. Yeah. Expletives, he loved his show. He's so funny, XYZ, but he also lived in public. But I also for me as a son, seeing my dad, yes, there's a certain lens I kind of look through that when it comes to me growing up. But I've seen what my dad was like, kind of living that life, and then the way he lives his life now. It's vastly different from when he was in the public eye to where he's, as he calls himself, just a parking lot guy. From where he
was to where he is now.
It's incredible to see, but I feel like God can use Kai in some pretty major ways, but I think he needs to let it happen. I also think that
he's also young.
He's also young.
Yeah, he's young.
But he also needs to get the right people
around him. Yeah,
of course. I mean, realistically, he's not going to find that on YouTube.
Yeah, and I think he's going to probably hopefully, and we pray that this incident kind of makes him want to pivot and look at things a little different. Maybe search God a little deeper. Maybe his relationship with the Lord is a bit superficial. And maybe he can dig in deep and because he's.
It also could just be a culture thing.
Yeah, but
sometimes but
the kid's facing real felony charges right now, and that's a big thing.
Now what? I want to hear what you have to say. I have a question about the felony charges. Though.
Go ahead.
Oh no! Wait. Which part are we pausing on?
No, felony charges, but you were going to say something.
Oh, wait, what did I say? Oh, yeah, the culture, the culture thing.
Yeah.
Because, like, sometimes you know how some cultures, like, you know, certain group of people, it's just like, we are just this. Like, there's a lot of cultures that it's like, oh, like, you know, we go to church, whatever, but then it's like, okay, you can go to church, but then you don't actually, like, live out what church is trying to teach you. Right? What are you trying to pastor, like, living out? I don't want to say just a true Christian lifestyle because they don't fit my version, quote unquote, of Christianity.
Right.
But it's like sometimes just a culture. Like there are certain cultures that are like the Latin culture. They're very heavily Catholic, right? And they hold certain beliefs in that. They hold a certain but that's also like a culture in a way, right? And sometimes there's different groups of people who have a certain basis that their family just has lived on, and even though they go to church, they may not live it fully out. So that's why I'm kind of saying like, oh, like he's like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian because he may consider just going to church, or that his family has believed in the same thing for a long time. And again, I'm not judging it. That's just this is just like another maybe another lens to kind of look through to kind of see the overall picture.
Yeah. And I like I said before, like I pray that this is a monumental moment for him. And he realizes what he's done is not great. It's not a great highlight in his streaming career or in his social media influencer career, if that's even a thing. But I think he'll learn from this. Hopefully he can grow from this. Hopefully the felony charges will be dropped.
Yeah, but do we know what the actual charges are?
Yeah, so he's facing felony charges of inducing a riot in New York City.
In New York City. The reason we have to say New York City is because they have they have strict laws.
They have strict laws when it comes to permits and getting certain permits to do gatherings at certain areas of New York City.
Yeah.
So he's facing that. I think he's also facing what's the other one?
Let me look.
I think Tyler,
so it's like a permitting issue for sure. I understand.
And then the rioting.
So rioting, like, what's the standard? I mean,
because 2 counts of citing a riot and unlawful assembly.
Yeah.
And he was, by the way, he was giving out PlayStations, headsets, controllers. So it wasn't just one; it was
multiple things.
But
but like inciting riot, I felt like would have to say, "Let's burn down this store." Like that's like a public figure.
No, there were storefronts that were damaged.
Right, but did he say to do that? There's a difference. I mean, because if this poor guy is giving it out, and people are losing their minds.
I think because of his platform and he being a public figure, it falls on him because I
think he was the catalyst.
Yeah, he was a catalyst.
That's the way they're seeing it, they feel like they have. I feel like in a weird way they have to like charge someone with it.
And I think they're using him as the scapegoat.
Yeah, because I would say his freedom of speech rights, I mean, the standard for incitement is pretty high. You have to be pretty, which I would hope to God he has a lawyer that can find that.
Yeah.
Because I would hate to see somebody that didn't say, let's tear this place down.
And it's complete anarchy.
But he didn't do that. He was giving things away.
Yeah.
And maybe
be careful. We'll get political here.
But that is a right. It's a right.
It's a free speech right. And I would like to say, like, if you're not deliberately calling for violence, then whatever you say or do, I may not like, but I have to be okay with it. Yeah. Like, that's kind of the standard.
I think he was, like Tyler said, he was the catalyst of what happened.
Right.
If it wasn't for Kai, these crowds wouldn't have manifested. Because if it was me or you, the crowds wouldn't have manifested the way they would have. They manifested when it came to Kai. Kai came in with the strength of giving.
But is that a crime?
It's not a crime, but the events that transpired afterwards, in the eyes of the law, it was based on New York City law and statute. He violated those laws.
Right. I understand permitting issues and all that. Right. No, I totally get it. If he didn't pull out permits,
and what is it called? Enticing or
inciting violence.
Inciting violence and rioting or whatever the case may be. I'm sure he's going to get a great lawyer because the guy makes a ton of money on social media.
I would hope that he wouldn't get charged for that. Maybe the permitting to get him on.
It's New York. They arrest people and let them go pretty quickly because they don't really do much when it comes to the law system up there.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to get political some more with the Egyptian governing body.
Oh, yes.
Versus our friend Travis. No, he's not our friend. Travis Scott.
Oh, yeah, let me hit Travis right now.
Travis Scott.
We have him live on the air. So Travis, how you doing?
Travis.
What's up, my bro?
Good old Travis. Well, we know Travis Scott is great friends with Kanye West.
Good old Yee.
Kanye. I mean, I don't want to talk too much on Kanye. he's been a polarizing figure, and ever since he came out being a Christian and coming out with albums called Jesus is King, he's on our side. But
which, by the way, I'm sorry, that is still great. I don't care what
but I thought the Sunday service stuff was awesome too. But not too much on Kanye. Let's just continue to pray for Kanye. I think his mental health is a real thing, and I think that he's a different Kanye when he's off the meds, and he's a better Kanye when he's on them. And that's just my personal belief.
Okay, good. I was going to wait for someone to say it before I said it.
Because I do believe that he does have underlying issues, but there's also some chemical stuff there too. I do believe that you can be delivered from a lot of things spiritually, but I do also believe that there's chemical things that we would have to address as well.
I still think he should have pulled a Paul.
Yeah, I mean,
but he disappeared for 3 years.
But not too much on Kanye. But this is what I'll say, and then we'll get to Travis. Kanye West was on a multiple platforms, podcast platforms, while he was doing what he was doing about the anti-Semitism stuff. Yeah. He publicly and very boisterously said that I am off my meds and I'm cool with that. And his family is not cool with that. The people that actually do love him are not cool with that. And clearly he went on a downward spiral with saying the outlandish things that he says. Yeah. He's a genius to his own right, but I think he's too brilliant of a guy for his own good. And I think it becomes a detriment more so than the opposite. Yeah.
I mean, when you make Alex Jones uncomfortable,
that's
Alex Jones is the
mediator and the voice.
That was a wild interaction.
Yes,
you make Alex Jones uncomfortable. Yeah. You have a true talent.
yeah, for sure. And shouts to Kanye. I think he's an incredible, brilliant businessman, brilliant talent, and he's a visionary.
Yo, if you ever hear this, come on the podcast.
Come on the pod, yay. But
we would love to have you.
But Travis Scott is very, very, very close with Kanye West, and Travis Scott is no stranger to headlines.
No.
The last couple years since COVID, he's been on many festivals, and he's been the brunt of memes and people talking mess about him and his ways of doing concerts. Recently, he's been definitely engaging in glamorizing satanic, signs and visions and rituals.
A lot of imagery.
Just
when we look at some of the artwork in the festivals and stuff like that, it's really hard to deny that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, who isn't doing that nowadays?
Right.
Well, that's just
Beyonce's, like you see
the Sam Smiths of the world.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift is a witch, according to some pastors here in South Florida. But I'm going to read the Rolling Stone clip here. It says, according to Rolling Stone...
I'm trying to imagine Taylor Swift in that scene of Monty Python on the Search for the Holy Grail. She's a witch! If you don't know what that is, you're too young. Look it up.
Yes, Google it. But anyway, so Travis Scott is apparently trying to get clearance to have this Egyptian festival in the country of Egypt, specifically in Giza. Right?
The pyramids of Giza. He wants them to be the backdrop of the festival, from what I understand.
From what I understand.
Hold on. Has there been other concerts there?
Yes.
Because I would think that'd be very hard being in the middle of literally nowhere.
Yeah.
Although it's just outside of Cairo. Apparently, you're like in one spot.
Right.
I'm hearing this just because one of my coworkers is Egyptian. He's like, "Oh yeah, you face one way in the city, you just turn around, and then just pyramids."
Yeah. So I mean, and it's becoming Travis Scott's representation, Travis Scott's as an entity versus Egyptian governing bodies and their concerns as to why they don't want Travis Scott partaking in these festivals in their country. But according to Rolling Stones and Live Nation's, Travis Scott's Utopia concert at the Pyramids of Giza in Egypt had not been canceled, despite numerous local news outlets reporting otherwise. Live Nation Middle East has confirmed that July 28th show is in fact canceled. And we're already in August, so this is literally a month later, but they're having legal back and forths now because obviously it's affecting his bottom dollar.
Right.
And so...
They don't care.
So Live Nation says that we regret to inform you that Utopia's show originally scheduled for July 28th at the Pyramids of Giza in Egypt is canceled. There's no rescheduled date, so there's not going to be a rescheduled date as of today. Mm-hmm. That may change. Unfortunately, despite the highest efforts, complex production issues meant that the show could not be constructed in the desert. We understand that this news is disappointing and not the outcome any of us desired. But if you look on the other side, Egyptian authorities stated that although those reports were made by Live Nation Middle East citing production issues for the cancellation, the reports from the last week indicated that Egyptian authorities had revoked the permit granting for Scott's performance because the show, and this is quote, the show goes against the cultural identity of the Egyptian people. The decision was reportedly made by the Egyptian Musicians Syndicate, a group responsible for approving and issuing permits for concerts. In a statement shared with the press, the syndicate said that it came to its decision after examining social media opinions and feedback, as well as news reports that included authenticated images and information about peculiar rituals performed by Scott during his performances. This, the syndicate said, stood in opposition to our authentic societal values and traditions, end quote. So, I thought that was fascinating because, as we know, Egypt, the country of Egypt, is Muslim and Orthodox Christian. Some may argue that the first Christian church arose from that region. A lot of people would say that the Aramaic church in what country is that?
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia is one of the first century Christian churches,
Which
but
they would not be wrong.
They wouldn't be wrong.
Biblically, they would not be wrong.
Yeah, biblically they would not be wrong. But Egypt's one of the
Christianity
oldest
was in
Christian.
Africa before it was in Europe.
Yeah. So Egypt holds one of the oldest Orthodox Christian churches, and of course, what you and I and all of us here in Western culture have seen in social media, through YouTube clips, social media reels, and the outbursts that our communities, Christian communities, have when every time Travis Scott has a festival or has a concert or goes to Coachella and starts with these imageries, and here's the Christians pointing their Bibles and cussing them out and things of that nature. I think that approach is unsettling for me because I don't think that's something that I would do. But for sure, I would stand on the rock that I stand, and I say, hey, this is not good because you're opening spiritual gateways that you don't need to be opening. Maybe he is doing it out of ignorance because it's the trendy shock value thing that's going to put eyeballs to his stuff. And now that everything's monetized and there's cash value there, anybody will do anything for the sake of going viral. I think Travis Scott's platform is big enough to not care so much about monetization because my man's making money hand over fist on every stream of revenue, whether it be ticket sales, album sales, merchandise, what have you. But this man, just
is consistently using satanic imagery.
Yes. So what do we feel about that, guys?
I mean, well, one, I want to just say good for the Egyptian government.
Absolutely.
Not to say that I agree totally with. I know that there's a lot of Islamic influence and there is Christian influence. Regardless of that, I'm definitely clearly, if there's the number one thing I'm against is anything satanic. So I was good for that government to say, hey, we don't want this representation in our country. This is not something we want. Two is man, looking at a lot of the imagery that I've been able to see of that Travis Scott, looking at a lot of even his lyrics that he's talking about, he's literally, it would be argument's sake, and I know it's art, so the difference between, saying art and, not confessing or using that as statements of what he's calling people to do, it's very, very dicey. And I know there's a whole law, what do you call it? It's a court battle right now that's talking about protecting art, because they want to use. There's some lawyers and some prosecutors that want to use some rappers' lyrics that have basically professed murders against them and things like that, and they're want to be able to say that you're allowed to do that. I don't know where that line is drawn, but I will just say that hey, some of his, I would say, borderline incitement of riots. When you look at some of his lyrics, talk about overthrowing the barricades and rushing the security guards and stuff like that. These are literally lyrics that are in his songs,
right.
and he's performing them at his concerts,
right.
where that starts to happen there.
Yeah.
So it's like, one, do you want any of that in your country? Like, I don't want to, I don't want to have any part of that. If it was my city, I was the mayor. I was like, no, this guy's not here. Get him out. We don't need
because it's bad press.
Like that.
It's bad press.
I don't want my facility being destroyed. If you're a mayor or you're, the head of a country or whatever, your job is to try to keep crime and nonsense and violence down or completely eliminated.
Right.
And this guy just brings that with him wherever he goes.
Right.
So it's like there's that issue that's, very, I think, a black and white issue. You start to look at, what he's doing as satanic imagery. I mean, that'd be more of a one-on-one conversation. And like, my heart would be like, I want to see everybody saved.
Yeah.
I believe that's who Christ wants everybody to be saved. So I have no, one, I don't think he's a believer. If you're going to put out blatant satanic imagery, suggestive satanic lyrics. I think some people would even argue like outright satanic lyrics.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a controversy. I would think it's safe to say that you're not a believer. You don't take it seriously if you do claim to be a believer.
He did fix his face to say last year that he does believe in Jesus because someone, I forget what show he was on, and what in an interview he said that he is a believer.
Oh, okay.
That he believes in God, and I'm like,
maybe
is it something that you check off on your box? That
you can believe in God, but you don't. But then
not have a relationship. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Sorry, not leave it out. Live it out.
Live it out. Yeah. So clearly, this man's not living it out. No. Pastor Wyman.
Let me pick my mic back up.
Yeah.
I'll say a couple of things. First, I would say good for Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
I would say good for them for using the power of social media.
Right.
And because you know me, I'm not the biggest fan of social media. I myself kind of like Doug's doing. Like I am. Like there was for a while I was off social.
Yeah.
And even now, like I'm not. I'm bare. Like I mean, I'll scroll through sometimes, but like even then, I'm not paying attention to like anything. Right. But good for them for calling something out that they don't want. Because here's the thing, people forget sometimes that the world watches the U.S.
Mm.
They do,
mm-hmm.
and I've heard this from a few friends that are not from the U.S. And they're like, man, people look at the U.S. as like the shining beacon moving forward. So when they see all this culture war stuff happening and all this weird things being pushed, they're kind of like, what is this? This is not the America that like the rest. Like, yes, we have a negative connotation as Americans, but America as the country and the ideal is held is like literally like looked at as it's like the greatest thing that the world has. I'm not saying it is. I'm just simply saying, like, I'm pointing out, me wearing a, U.S. shirt.
Yeah.
But I mean, I want to give Travis a little bit of a scapegoat because I know when it comes to production, from my experience with it and from people that I know, they're not always in control of what their show looks like. They may have an influence on it, but they also have people who design entire shows for them. That's the person's entire job. Okay?
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that it's all that person's fault. I'm not saying it's all his thing, but I'm just simply saying there could be a different type of thing involved that we just don't really know about the full thing is. Now, yes, if he's saying that if he believes in God, I'd be like, okay, man, like, I would love to kind of.
So did Satan.
Work it out.
He acknowledges God too.
And, then it makes me kind of question, like, okay, well, what type of
theology?
I would love to just understand how your brain is functioning.
Yeah.
Give me 5 minutes in your brain. Just give me 5. And so I think it's a very smart move.
Yeah.
Because remember, people forget what we do here. We do have a lot of freedom. We have the freedom of expression. We have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom you could rap and sing about killing and murder. Actually, I think it was Snoop. I think it was Snoop Dogg. A reporter asked him one time, in your lyrics, you're talking about blanking these people and da 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 da. It's like, how does your wife feel about it? And he's like, well, my wife knows the difference of how I really am and
the persona,
and the lyrics and the art that I'm trying to put out there. And I was kind of like, interesting. So then why put it out in the first place?
Yeah.
because he's trying to reach an audience, a particular audience,
and sell records, and that's what sells.
So because that sex sells and all that other stuff.
Right.
But anyways, I think with the whole satanic imaging thing, we've been in this culture war that's been building up for some time. If you want me to, I can absolutely, bring this to our final subject as well. Very easy transition. But we're definitely in a culture war over a lot of things right now, and I think people are really starting to push back against a lot of things. Because I think for so long it was like, okay, we'll just let it be.
Yeah.
We'll just let it ride. Just, okay, that's weird, but, it's not really affecting us. But now it's affecting us.
Yeah.
And now I'm being people pushed to celebrate. It's no longer, what do you call it? It's no longer tolerance.
Yeah.
It's now you should celebrate. And if you don't celebrate,
if you don't do it, you're
now
out.
I'm not being tolerated.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is completely ironic against everything that they believe. But that's beside the point.
Right.
So I think it's great that there is some pushback from outside the U.S., and I think it kind of, in a weird way, sends a message. And of course, you can. It's like, oh, people are disappointed they can't see him, whatever. I mean, yeah, it's like if I could see my favorite artist, yeah, I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be upset, right?
Yeah.
Great. Thankfully, my favorite artist is a Christian band, so I don't have to really worry about that. But
Unless you're in California.
Unless you're in Cali, then okay. You know what? I would hold that in my back pocket the whole podcast. I'm like, should I bring up California? It's a whole other thing. Aaron, I love you. Just come home, please. So the Aaron, okay. We'll make sure.
Yeah.
Not crossing a weird line. Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we're seeing that pushback.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I'm glad that especially the whole everything's Satan's like, whoa, this is weird. Even social media is blowing up about it. Where it's just like, oh yeah, all these, not just Travis Scott, but all these different artists. Sam, whatever his face is, and then even Beyonce, all these others are, and even of course Golden Girl Taylor. Yeah. Yes, they're having these things, and people are going, "Whoa, this is not right."
Yeah.
And I think that's also why we know, in a weird way, it's demonically based, because almost immediately people are going "There's something wrong."
Yeah.
You can just set you don't even have you may not be able to fully describe or fully understand, but you just know it's not okay.
Right.
It's not okay. Kind of feeding into general revelation, God revealing Himself through His creation. Right, but it's the same thing. It's like if Satan's trying to reveal himself through God's creation, and we see that it's not what it's supposed to be, you get that immediate pushback of this is not okay. So in a weird way, good for Egypt. I'm honestly glad they're doing it.
Yeah, I am too.
Personally, Javi.
Yeah, I mean. I agree. I concur with everything that you guys said. I think that
what a cop-out answer. I'm just kidding.
No, but honestly, there is a little part of me that wants to say, but I know that it's going to come against what America stands for in its Constitution. But if a little piece of me would push back on that a little bit and say, man, if America can just take a piece of that and somehow apply it here where those things aren't tolerated and aren't affirmed, and knowing that it is if that's tolerable, if that's tolerated, if that's affirmed, that it's not really a net positive in society. It's the opposite.
Right.
When we look at the founding, I mean, if we're going to go down this route, look at the founding fathers.
Right.
Right. That's why they put checks and balances.
Yeah.
That's why, in the Constitution, it's enshrined that, hey, no one branch will have power over the other, because we want to make sure that one doesn't.
And God was in it once upon a time,
right.
and now they're
God
taking God.
Right.
Yeah, and now they're taking God out of it. I mean, even in our currency, it says, "In God we trust." When are they going to take that out?
Right.
I'm waiting for the day I will riot at that point.
Well, no, and I would.
If it's going to be taken out of our currency, where are we going? Bro?
Right. Well, here's one thing I want to just say. So when we look at the first,
I did.
Okay.
So when we look at the First Amendment, it's Congress shall make no law infringing on the freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. So that's supposed to be federal law.
Right.
States and localities can. We actually had decency laws in localities for a long time.
Right.
So to say like a city could ban Travis Scott.
Right.
So, and then that's on the local level. It's
Right.
that you're not supposed to be a federal level. So we have that power here. We should have more of it than we think. We could, rally together, and that gives us actually more hope because we can change our city.
Right.
Like I have hope. Like, this podcast, who we are in our churches, we can change our city.
I believe that we're in the brinks of revival, and this is probably a conversation for another pod, but
Yeah.
we're literally at the cusp.
Can we just do another podcast recording after this?
Yes. That we're literally at a cusp of like revivals erupting in pockets of this country.
I fully agree with that.
But look at what happened earlier this year.
At the church, the service that just kept going for like three days. No.
Was it 3 weeks?
It was threefold. It was more than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It stopped getting coverage after like 5 days, but a lot of like big name pastors started to go after that because it just kept going, and then they had to move it outside. And I think after it moved outside, after that it kind of dissipated a little bit, and then you just stop hearing about it. But yeah, it went for more than just
and a lot of, like you said, a lot of coverage, a lot of pastors backed it. Pastor Greg Laurie actually had a thing about end times, and we're living in those end times, and he also touched on why we are living in the end times, and he talked about China being a mega power, the stuff that's going on in Iran, the stuff that's going on in South Korea, the Ukraine and Russia conflict. All these things are signs, according to Pastor Greg Laurie, that we're in the end times. However, he also touched on the positive things, and says that what happened in that church is also signs that that we're living in the end times because of these revivals erupting in pockets of not just this country, but in underground churches in China, in other cities and countries that is not America.
Right.
And he also says that that's a positive, and even though it's a positive, it's also a sign that the end times that we read about are currently the times that we are living today. Right. So how do you feel about that?
So, I mean, end times, the whole study of eschatology, like my whole life growing up.
Which I find fascinating.
Oh, it is.
I could talk about this for 3 hours.
Yeah. It's like, how I say there's intellectual porn.
Yeah.
And, it's fun, exciting, but it's not real. It's just like real porn. It's fun, exciting. But it's not real. It's damaging. Yeah. And then there's sex. Yeah. And in marriage, it's wonderful. It's awesome. And it's like eschatology is like actual like sex. Yeah. Like intellectual sex, and it's real and it's awesome. That's how I kind of view it. So I've always struggled with the one view that most of the West adopts. And it's the fact that the end times is coming. And we're in this state, and it's going to happen, and there's going to be this one world domination, and all these things are going to happen. Right. And basically Satan's going to take over the entire world.
But that's not post-millennialism, is it?
There's 4 different views.
Right.
I'm familiar.
Pre-tribulation,
post-tribulation.
Right.
Pre-millennial, post-millennial, and there's another one, right?
Or
let me see. And then
I probably should have brought all my stuff with me.
Yeah. So I'll just give you my understanding.
Right.
So there's the one that I think most people, if you were to ask them,
most people believe that God will come and that He's going to create a new heaven and a new earth.
Well, I think everybody believes that.
Right.
Now it's where do we fall in line with that? I think most people would say, well, the tribulation is going to happen.
Right.
All the Western world's going to fall. There's going to be no freedom. Christianity is going to be oppressed. We're going to have a one world currency, a one world government, a one world army. Yeah. And basically Christianity is going to be wiped off the face, and Christians are going to have to hide and all that, and there's going to be no place for that.
Can't wait.
And then the idea is that we come into this millennial state, right? Where it's not a perfect world, but a world moving in the right direction.
All right, here we go. Premillennialism is a view of an alternative of postmillennialism, which teaches the second coming of Jesus will occur after 1,000-year period of righteousness, and now it's called amillennialism, which teaches that the 1,000-year period is not meant to be taken literally, but the current church of Messianic age.
Okay. So, thank you for the actual definition, because I'm familiar with all of them, but I don't have them articulated that way.
I'm using my education, guys.
So, I've always had a problem. Just because I felt the world didn't line up with the fact that, hey, we're going to move to this one world currency, that there's going to be this one world government. I would say, right now, it is more difficult for that to happen now than at any other period of time in the world.
Why? There's Bitcoin, bro.
I would even argue that Bitcoin is something that even makes it more difficult.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's not all. If it was a government Fed coin or something like that was worldwide, that had one government.
We're actually not far from that, though. I heard.
Well, but the point is that there'll always be competition, and the fact that there's all that ability to not have control, which is essentially these cryptocurrencies do, it eliminates central control.
Right.
That makes it more difficult.
Yeah.
So I would say that we're in a world that I think is very difficult for that to happen. So, far be it from me. I'm not God. I don't know everything.
Right.
But I found that view to be very difficult. Then there's the idea that we're in the millennial state right now, that the Great Tribulation has happened, and that we've moved into the millennial state, but it's not necessarily 1,000 years. What does that look like? But it's the underlying message of what the millennial state is, that it's not a perfect world, but a world moving in the right direction, preparing heaven and earth to become one, like almost heaven and earth becoming one, not all at once, but moving in that direction. So I think there's validity to that being the place we are right now. I think there's argument to say that's where we are now. And then the other state that I kind of understand a little bit about is that when you talk about the Great Tribulation, that it's not necessarily one event, but it's consistent evil rulers rising up, desiring world domination.
Right.
And that's been since the dawn of humanity.
Right.
That's always been. It will probably always be until we get to
Jesus.
Heaven and earth becoming one.
Yeah.
And it will always be a pushback, and it's for the church to push back against that at a consistent level. And so that's kind of the view that I think I'm pretty subscribed to right now.
Me too. I'm kind of there too.
That there's just always
Tyler
going to be
isn't,
these.
He believes in dragons and unicorns, so I don't know what we're doing.
Finish before I start going.
So just that being said, that I kind of subscribe to that view. I don't necessarily believe that there's if I were to say, when they talk about the temple being destroyed and things of that nature, we have to remember that a lot of these things did happen, and the desecration of I forget what they specifically call it, but it's basically where a false god is put in the place of God and forced to be worshipped.
Right.
That did happen.
Yeah.
The Jewish
and
temple, that happened.
Yeah.
They put Zeus there.
Yeah.
They forced the Jewish people, the Jewish rabbis, to eat pork, forced them on their knees, and to worship Zeus.
Yeah.
And then they destroyed the temple. That happened in 70 AD.
Yeah.
And I have to also remember that when the Bible was written, when we talk specifically about Revelation, a lot of times I've read that with the lens that, this is for the church today. And maybe there's some validity to that. But there were 7 churches that letter was given to. There were 7 physical churches that were saying, be prepared to that. I think there's more validity to viewing it that lens of this oppression that's coming. And then we look at history and we saw, man, that oppression did come. Nero, which I forget, there's something very interesting in his name, matching up with Roman letters, that it actually comes out to 666.
Yeah,
something very, very, very interesting with that. And I'm not educated enough to give you a complete historical view on that.
Far from being well versed on that neither. So
but it was just very interesting, very interesting on how that happened. That Christians at that time, he was forbidding to sell and trade food. So all those types of oppression did happen. So whether we want to say that's going to happen still, there's a lot of validity that those things did happen. So whether you want to say that was the end times or not, a lot of these things did happen. Mm-hmm. So when I hear somebody say things like that, particularly that's a pastor, and I say this with a lot of grace, sometimes when you have a large platform, you tend to believe that you have the idea to speak on a lot of different issues. And just because you're well versed and people want to hear what you want to talk about on one issue and you're really good at, doesn't mean that you have the rationale to speak to a political climate to say this is happening now.
Right.
Maybe you have a lot to say about the Bible, but that doesn't mean that you're able to say this is happening, this is what the Bible is saying is happening, and then this is also the political climate that's going to make this happen. So that's just something I take a little bit with caution. That yes, Greg Laurie is really good. I would argue almost a scholar. Does he read politics in the way to say this is happening there? I mean, I don't know him to have that understanding. But far be it from me. I want to respect his view. Maybe he's right and I'm wrong. But I look at it that way.
Yeah, and there's other people in the church world where they subscribe to, and I kind of understand it too, that the end times has been happening, right. that it's been going on, and through the empires that risen and fallen, right. and the genocides that's happened, the Holocaust that did happen, right. The stuff that happened historically here in this country, right. The people that have been oppressed, the people that have been killed, the people that have been slaughtered, the people right. that have been lynched, the wars that occurred in the right. in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like. Right. There's validity in that too. Like we have been living in the end times, right? It's just that now, because from a keystroke to a scroll, we're exposed to so much wickedness, so much evil, so much stuff that happens across the pond, right? That it's more exposed. So because of its exposure, we tend to incline ourselves to say, "Oh my gosh, we're now currently living in the end times." But I believe in the grander scheme of things, it's been happening for a really long time.
And I would say there's a human nature that wants to believe this narrative, and it's been a narrative that we can look through history. People believe that this is as bad as it's ever been, and it's only getting worse. And that's kind of an idea that every person in history felt that way.
Right.
And if we were to really scale back and look at just the last 100 years in this country, this is arguably one of the better times in this country. And we look at world history,
look at the Roman Empire, bro. Let's just look at the Roman Empire.
Well, what was going on there? We look at it as this great advancement, and there's argument, yes, for that time. Yeah. Do you know that The movie The Purge, is taken from an actual Roman festival that they would allow to happen? That was a real thing.
Yeah.
Something that we think is unthinkable.
Thank God that we're not living in those times.
Right. So I would argue that my view is we are moving in this right direction.
Yeah, I think
are we in a perfect world?
No.
And if you compare, the West and America to Utopia, yes, it's very flawed. If you compare it to other places, really great. Yeah. If you compare it to historical world, the way most people live their lives, like we're right below heaven almost. That's how people would have viewed it 1,000 years ago, the world and life that we live here today. It's an unconceivable world of freedom, an unconceivable world of decency. But yes, we can pull it apart and say it's not utopia. Absolutely. And we have a lot of work to do.
But we're definitely on a spike up.
In the right direction. I would agree.
I would even say that in the next 300 years, we're going to see an incline of a better direction, a spike up. I think there's going to be revivals, bro.
It's God's world. Yeah. The enemy doesn't have the ability to take over this world.
Right.
At the end of the day, God does intervene, and He uses flawed, messed up people such as ourselves to do it. And I think this is part of it. I think that what you guys are doing here is a part of that. I'm honored to be not just with talented individuals like yourself, but individuals that I believe God is working through.
Yeah.
And I'm just so honored to be here.
Yeah, for sure. Amen. You beautiful stud, you. What you got, Tyler, before we wrap up?
I don't know. Y'all probably just stole my thunder. So it's fine. I would say this. Actually, it's funny. I was Will, who's the pastor who I'm kind of under and I'm working with at Proclaim. He introduced me to a bunch of pastors that he's really good friends with. Kind of the close network that they have.
Right.
And they kind of brought me in. And they made fun of me, called me an intern for about 3 months. I'm like, you all know I have a degree? They're like, no, we don't care. Shut up. No, I'm just kidding. No, they're great guys. But recently we had a poker night. And so we were hanging out. So Will was like, hey,
heathens. I knew you guys
playing
were
cards.
Playing cards with them, with them chips. Oh my gosh, not real money. So, we're hanging out, we're eating food, just playing poker. I cleaned them out, by the way. So
Yeah.
Team
Emphasis on not real money.
not real money. So I'm still as poor as I walked in when I walked out. But we were sitting there, and it's really great to kind of hear like people who like I share a lot in common. Like I share like a lot in common with like mentally in common with, where we have a lot of same passions, whatever. And like they talk about a lot of things that I want to talk about as well. But then of course sometimes they go off on these different things, whatever. But at one point the topic of the rapture came up because one of the guys is working on his doctorate, and part of his doctorate is bringing in the end times into the modern day. Not saying that the modern day is the end times, but it's like bringing it, the way he explained it was a little bit different. He's just like, it's how does the end times like influence today, because he's talking about church influence. I believe that's what he was talking about, but there was a lot of conversation on that. But anyways, so we went around the table and everyone's like, like are you post mid or pre-tribulation, da 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 da, right?
Yeah.
And so they got to everyone. I was quiet because I'm like, I just want to hear. Like I'm one of those people like I love hearing what other people have to say.
Right.
Yes, I have a lot of myself what I want to say. Shocker to everyone who knows me. But it's like I still like hearing what people have to say.
Right.
And it got to me. They're like, so what do you think? And I was. And it took me a second to kind of gather my thoughts because I'm like, I want to say a lot of things, but I kind of brought it back to, I said, realistically, I want to live out every day as if Jesus is coming tomorrow. And here's the thing, like in the context that Revelation was written, it was written as if the end times were happening tomorrow, because Paul was adamant that Jesus is coming back.
Right.
Adamant that he was coming back. Right. Which, fun fact, the word rapture is not found in the Bible. Revelation. Look at it.
Even the idea from the rapture doesn't even come in Revelation.
No.
Well, I'm saying there's a little bit of doctrine, but it's not even in Revelation.
It's even then it's an interpretation.
Right, and I disagree with the interpretation.
Which is funny because
it's not literal to interpretation. Right.
Well, what it says is that it will be like the days of Noah, and then it starts to say what two will be in a bed, one will be swept up, and the other won't.
But again, right. That's why a lot of extreme people and extreme groups gravitate towards Revelation, because of the extreme deep imagery that is used throughout it. So when it comes to that, like I don't take Revelation as anything more than what it's supposed to do, and because it's an apocalyptic book, right? But it's not apocalyptic in the way that our modern context sees it as apocalyptic. It is the actual Greek word is actually it actually just says the word reveal, right? Revelation, that's what it. But it's actually a verb to reveal, and Paul was. I'm mixing up people. But what the author was trying to reveal was that Jesus is Lord. That's the revelation right there. There you go. Right. Class dismissed. Everyone go home.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
like Revelation is all about revealing Christ as Lord, because as he was saying within the Roman times and Nero, like not that Christianity was oppressed. It was just like they would have. If someone accused you of being Christian, you could be taken before a court and you could say no and be fine and fly under the radar. Right. Or you could say yes and have things taken away from you, your business taken away, your house, your this, your that. You would be martyred.
You could be martyred. I was just going to say that.
Not as much as people think it was.
Well, all the disciples were martyred.
Most of the disciples were martyred, but not always in the way that people thought they were. But, yes, but also, not in...
Well, Peter was crucified upside down.
Upside down on a tree because he didn't want to be... Anyways.
Yeah. Even John they tried to, and then they marooned him on the island.
Yeah.
So, but the whole point of that is this, is it was the Roman emperor was supposed to be the Lord. Right? Mm-hmm. And then, basically, the authors calling him out, the church is like, yo, you freaking, got to step up your game, Are you going to let this Roman emperor be Lord, or are you going to be, Jesus is Lord? What do you really want to do? That's what he's really calling out. Yes, all the dramatic imagery, whatever, but realistically, Revelation is just Jesus is Lord.
Right, because Jesus rose from
and so, are you going to just say no and fly under the radar, or are you actually going to go out and live proactively in your faith?
And possibly get decapitated.
Because listen, Jesus never said that life would be successful.
Yeah.
Just saying. But so that's why when it comes to the conversation of the end time, I kind of laugh because in a weird way I share the same stance as one of my professors, and he actually told a story about when he was in college. He was because he wanted to learn about eschatology because it's exciting stuff, and it's like you have the dramatic imagery and all this stuff, so you want to learn all this deeper stuff. And so when he got to college and he was in part of the class was eschatology, but it was one day.
What?
It was one day, and he was like, "What the heck?" So he was like, "Well, the day came." He was super excited, and then the professor spent 5 minutes on it and then moved on. And he was like, "This is stupid." he was mad. So he went to the professor. So he told me because I even asked him like, "What do you think about it?" Like I was trying and so he told me the story. And he went to his professor after the class, and he's like, "What the heck, bro? Like, I was so excited to talk about the end times." And his professor, and he's like, and this is like, I also share this as well, is we don't know jack crap about the end times. We don't. We know nothing.
Yeah.
There's speculation, there's interpretation.
Yeah.
But we know nothing. We don't know when Christ comes back. We don't know, all this stuff. That's why they only spent 5 minutes in class about eschatology because. And even for us, I was in school for theology. Yeah. And eschatology only took half a day. And that's because he explained certain things, but then that was it. Right. Yeah. Literally, that was it.
And that's true, though. That is very true. We don't know if the freaking sky's going to open up and, the multiverse is going to come through and, oh, wow, there's Thor. He's alive and thriving.
I mean, it is said, though. It is said, though. And actually, I at one point, if I'm going to be honest, I wanted to be like a person. You know how sometimes pastors in the middle of a song go up and kind of mini preach during a song, right? You know the song "Grace to Gardens." So I was in Israel and I was I was learning a bunch of stuff and I realized because I was in the Garden of Gethsemane when I kind of realized all this, and I was like, "Oh, Grace Gardens, Gethsemane, blah blah," right? And I realized I'm like, "Oh my gosh, there's a break in the song," because I'm still in that church mentality kind of thing, right? And I was like, oh man, because one of the things that is believed is that Christ is going to come back the way he left. Right. And the way that he left is he left Jerusalem, walked out of the eastern gates, right, walked to the Mount of Olives, ascended to heaven. But so they think that there are some people who believe that he will come back down, walk to the eastern gates, and then take everyone home, essentially, right? But the problem is that the eastern gate is completely filled in. Right.
It's completely what?
It filled in. It's now a wall.
Oh yeah, it's a wall now. Yeah,
because the story is told that when the Muslims took over Jerusalem, they heard about this Jesus guy, and they didn't want him to come back because the word back then was Jesus come back tomorrow. Right. Right. He's like, we can't let this guy come back. Right. How crazy is it? How crazy would our faith be if people who didn't believe in Jesus were so affected by him?
I know, right?
Not even here. How crazy should our faith be? Anyways. But it's okay, when Jesus comes back, it's okay, graves in the gardens, thinking about the lyrics, there's also entire grave sites in front of that as well. Because in Jesus being a Jewish man, by culture, is not allowed to walk over a grave or he'd be unclean inside of God. That's just one of their beliefs. So there's graves and there's a wall, and so I'm thinking to myself it would be a great pastor moment. It's Jesus is going to come back. He's going to walk up to the bodies. They're going to rise out like an army, and they'll start singing, "Holy, holy is Lord Almighty." Yeah. And he walks the gate. He won't have to say it. He'll breathe, and there will be dust. And he'll walk back in, and then just go to the whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, and I look back now, I'm like, I'm a punk. No, but that's one of the ways that people think that he's going to come back, and I'm like, okay, but that's me. But then it's I keep read certain things. I'm like, I don't know anymore.
He's riding on a dragon, bro.
Listen, it's a unicorn. Come on, don't mix it up. But it's great to hear what people have to say about eschatology because we just don't know. We have no idea. So if you have anxiety, this is for people listening too. Yeah. If you have anxiety about the Valentine's, welcome to the club. Right? Yeah. Everyone has anxiety, especially with Revelation. There is actually a book I want to read that's about this and about the anxiety about the end times. And because I was kind of listening at one point to the author, and basically it's like, there are entire studies and things based on people's anxiety and fear of the end times. It's okay to be because again, it's a deep human thing of like we don't know. There's an unknown, but like at the same time, like everyone's kind of united. Like no one really cares about the end until it's here.
Yeah.
And it's weird and fun to kind of think like that we don't really know much about this because it's like, we have this belief that the Bible has all the answers, and so when it kind of in a way leaves us,
like.
Going, what the heck, bro? What's going on?
Hands up in the air, yeah.
But of course, for us Christians, we don't have to worry about that because Jesus is the end of it all.
Right.
Or I'm sorry, he's the forever.
Right.
So so that's why when it comes to the end times, if you have an anxiety about it, it's okay to have anxiety because you don't know. However, let it go
and live your life.
Live your life because guess what? Yes, you want to live out your life as if he's coming back tomorrow, but you also don't need to really worry about it because at the end of the day, he's still a victor of it all.
Yeah.
Come on.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Wyman. Mic drop.
Yeah.
I am not dropping this mic.
And that is our TED Talk for the night, guys.
I'm tired.
But I hope that you guys got something out of this. We touched on a lot of cool little topics. That was pretty dope. It was fun to do.
That was erratic.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. This was actually to give you guys a behind the scenes. This wasn't even planned. We actually had a different podcast planned with a different, I wasn't supposed to be here. Yeah, Tyler wasn't supposed to be here. And I'm going to leave it at that. But thank you guys. I love you guys. Again, subscribe, share my clips, share the channel. It helps with the algorithm. Thank you kindly. Likes. Hit the like button.
And we still got to get you on X, formerly Twitter, bro.
Yeah.
We still got to get you there.
I don't know why it's called X, but I guess we could talk about that.
Literally said because he likes X.
That's literally what he said. That's the only reason.
Jeez, that guy's amazing.
He just likes the X. That's it.
Love you guys. Till next time. Peace.